The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects.
First of all,
This is the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
it might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't care.
The BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the Sports Guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The BS Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report, a foggy day here in Southern California. I'm not sure where the sun is, but I know where Chuck Klosterman is. He's right here in the Subway Fresh Tech Hotline. What's happening?
Everything, nothing. That's kind of my answer I give when that question comes up now, isn't it?
I like it. It's your stock answer.
Yeah, I know, but now it seems rehearsed. Now people are going to turn on it.
We need a new one. We need to keep people on their toes. We had to break out all the Pop Culture Hall of Famers this week because Charlie Sheen has basically obliterated the internet. I don't think a single person has ever willfully done what he's doing to the internet right now. Where do you stand on this whole thing?
Well, I mean, in terms of the internet, I guess I haven't thought too much about it, but just in general, I don't remember this ever happening before where somebody went this crazy and still totally controlled the message. That's what's different about this. I mean, other people have, Courtney Love and Mel Gibson and stuff, people have went insane, but it seems like it kind of unraveled on them. It doesn't seem like it's unraveling for him as much.
No.
He's really able to sort of dictate every idea about him. I think there might be actually some fear from some elements of the media not to talk too much about it, because I think that there's something like, what if he dies or whatever? That would, what if he dies? And some story comes out where someone's, dogpiling on him. I think that is some fear. Well, I mean, now here's what I wanted to ask you, because I feel like you're always good about knowing sort of what the conventional wisdom is. Okay?
Thank you.
So is the conventional wisdom now that he's always on drugs? Is it that he's almost never on drugs except for these binges? Is it that it's totally erratic? I mean, he passed the drug test. He seems to be in pretty good shape. He's getting up very early. He's doing a lot of work. He's doing a lot of interviews. What do people assume about this now?
So I assume you watched the 2020 last night.
I did, although I was somewhat disappointed when I realized I had seen almost all of that already.
I was disappointed, but at the same time, I was riveted for an hour, and I learned a lot. Like, the fact that he gets up at 5:30 with a personal trainer, I was just, stunned by. Maybe that had been out there. Or
was that... At first, I was like, well, he could have done this one day. But he looks like he is in shape.
Yeah. They had the footage. He was doing real workout stuff, and he had, a six-pack, and he had the whole... It seemed legitimate to me. And then, that he passed the drug test, I was stunned by, because I just assumed he was claiming he was sober, and he wasn't. And then... when you hear...
If you're using cocaine, though, that goes out of your system in 48 hours. You could feasibly be living an insane life like that and still pass a drug test. What do most people think?
I think people just assume that he's on drugs. Seems to be the general perception. But, I watched him...
I'm getting the sense that the assumption now is moving away from that. That he really is, this is just sort of a persona he has created now. And that he's just going with this, and he's just sort of tapping in to, this part of his id that's now the totality of his personality.
It seems like, he did sell me a little bit in that 2020 thing about that he just has these binges. And he seems to take a lot of pride in when he has the binges, he can do more drugs than anybody else, and he has superhuman powers. And I thought it was interesting that he brought up Sinatra and some of these other famous partiers, really like a badge of honor. I almost didn't feel like it was for show. I feel like he sits around and really believes that there's never been a better partying celebrity than him.
Well, I think that he's making a good argument for that.
Yes.
He is living. He's not dying. He is doing these things. Has anyone talked to Joaquin Phoenix about this?
No, I think he's still in hiding from the documentary that bombed.
Yeah, well, okay, so I was thinking about this. Okay, did you see I'm Still Here?
I did.
Okay.
It was a tough hour and a half, especially like the thing that amazed me about that documentary is they had spent so much time crafting the fact that it was actually real. And then as soon as they got a little negative feedback, Casey Affleck just panicked and said it was a hoax. And so then it was like, well, what is this then? It's not entertaining, and it was a hoax the whole time. Like, they kind of shot themselves in the foot, I felt like.
Well, yeah, plus, I mean, I was shocked anyone thought it was real. I mean, 10 minutes in, you can tell that it's fake. Plus, you just can't do a media hoax through a film anymore. People are immediately skeptical of it to begin with, but also there's so much information during the build-up that you can't trick people. But what I think is kind of interesting comparison is, okay, so he was basing this character as some famous person who loses his mind, and he was sort of using like a Bob Dylan template.
Yeah.
Like if somebody lost their mind, the breaking point would be, I'm inauthentic, so I need to do something real. But what's actually happening with this Charlie Sheen situation, which is real, is something that now seems completely obvious, that if a really famous person loses their mind, it's not going to be away from fame. It's going to be toward it. You know, that if a famous person goes nuts, it's not going to be because fame has changed them to a point where they feel uncomfortable with it. It will be the only thing they feel comfortable with. And that, but if he had made the movie about, if Joaquin Phoenix had made a movie where he acted like Charlie Sheen, it would have seemed even less plausible.
Yeah.
But we had to actually see this for real to see what this will look like.
And the other part with Charlie Sheen is the porn relationship he's had, because like in the 90s he dated Ginger Lynn for I think a couple of years or whatever, and I always thought it was weird that he called that like the greatest relationship of his career and the only person who understood him completely. And now he's with these two porn stars, and it's, he said to the poor 2020 lady last night, she said, why do you gravitate toward porn stars? And he's like, because they're the best at what they do, and I'm the best. And it really seems like he also believes that. Like he is some sort of sexual, potent male that nobody else could compare to.
Well, I mean, to a degree, I do think that he's in on this joke as well. Like, I think he thinks this is funny. I think that he's also realizing that maybe he's a little more entertaining at just talking like a crazy man than he would have imagined. The thing about the 2020 thing that to me was the most interesting point is when the two women he lives with, one's a porn star, the other I think is just a model or something. But they were asked, would you marry Charlie Sheen? And one was like, absolutely. The other was like, oh, I'd have to think about it. Because that seemed unconstructed to me. You'd think if you were constructing that interview, let's say we imagine Charlie Sheen and these women are creating this scenario, they would have the same answer. It might be they both want to marry him, or they both have no, we're totally free, there's no. It was interesting that they had a disagreement on that. It made me think that they were just answering sort of honestly. Another time when they're asked a question, I think the one who's a porn star, she begins her answer by going like, I'll take this one. So it's like they hadn't, if you were faking an interview, you wouldn't have the person shush the other person to talk. You just say like, well, okay, you answer these questions in this way. That part did seem unrehearsed to me.
Well, why can't this all be genuine?
Well, I mean,
why are you skeptical?
Well, I think you'd have to be somewhat skeptical. I mean, don't you? I'm not saying why can't it be. It certainly can be, but
see, to me, it's
thing in any of these scenarios. I think it was just like the Joaquin Phoenix thing. The first time you heard about that film, if you're a smart person, your first question is, does this seem like a construction? And initially, with this Charlie Sheen stuff, it did seem like a construction. But as time has moved on, it seems more credible to me.
I'm 100% buying it, and I think he's just crazy, and he.
So when you say crazy, are you meaning crazy the way like you're gonna meet my friend, he's totally crazy, or do you mean insane?
I think he's kind of insane.
Okay, so
but in a way that is not totally destructive to other people, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, I mean that is the thing. It's like how are there still kids in that house? Obviously, there's nothing going on there that's so inappropriate that like social services have stepped in.
Right. But here's the thing. I think he felt like, he'd had these 2 binges. CBS, all this stuff is playing out. He has no control over the CBS side of the thing, and the stories are spinning, and what the crew was saying about him. And I think he just snapped and he said, you know what? It's 2011. I can control some of this narrative myself, and I'm just going to be me from this point on, and I'm going to say how I feel. And I think once he started doing it, I think he felt liberated. And the thing that I found was interesting with that 2020 interview last night, some of the other stuff he's done, is that he's the first celebrity in a while that I feel like is just 100%, this is me. This is who I am. I'm not trying to be anybody. I'm not trying to sugarcoat what I'm saying. I'm not trying to play some sort of role. Like, think of how many celebrities we have that pretend to be people that they're really not, or twist things around about themselves to be more palatable.
That's absolutely true, that people twist things around or create a personality to be more palatable. Now, I don't know if this is truly who he is. One thing I saw that was interesting on Twitter, actually, our friend Molly Lambert, I believe, twittered this.
Yes.
She twittered that she thought that Charlie Sheen is sort of doing to masculinity what Courtney Love did to femininity and feminism, which is to amplify it so far that you begin to see how ridiculous the original concept really is. And that's a very interesting thought, although there's one, I think, sort of problem with it, in that Courtney Love really constructed her world. I mean, she was a nobody. She basically looked at rock music and punk music and Hollywood and said, I'm just going to become this person with these values. But Charlie Sheen's world was constructed for him.
Yeah.
To him, there's nothing weird about fame and being on film and being in public at all.
Well, because he said it's been his whole life.
Exactly, and everyone around him. So he kind of came into that situation. It is possible that this is occurring because maybe for the first time in his life is dawning on Charlie Sheen that his life really is bizarre and weird and totally unreal.
Yeah.
That's causing this to happen.
That's
Other thing I'm wondering about is, how do you think this is going to change the cultural memory of 2.5 Men? Because
I guarantee you're the first person who's asked that question.
Well, because here's why I bring it up. Typically, for the longest time, how was 2.5 Men described? It was described as like, God, there's this terrible show and it's so popular. I see it on an airplane sometime and it's so weird. It's like this huge show that much of America's watching, and all the people, in my subculture or your subculture, we have no reference for it. And traditionally, shows that are like that are remembered fondly but dismissively. Like the Beverly Hillbillies is the best example of the show that was incredibly popular, totally ignored by critics at the time or disliked by critics at the time. Now when people talk about the Beverly Hillbillies, they don't talk about it as a great show, but they say this was like what it was like to live in America at that time. Or Laverne and Shirley was like this too. These really popular shows that no one took that seriously.
I would throw Everybody Loves Raymond in there.
Probably. That's probably the most recent example prior to 2.5 Men.
Yep.
Okay. But now it's going to seem very different because the memory of this Charlie Sheen event, this period of time, is going to completely usurp the show. Okay? It's going to be, in fact, in general, the memory of Charlie Sheen now is going to be, it's amazing. People will bring this up anytime a celebrity does anything like this for the next 50 years. But the show now that he was on is going to seem, because there's already been some talk that on the television show he's kind of playing like a muted version of himself.
Right.
It's going to be like, well, I don't know, some metaphor for something, that there was this show that was made for most of America and was kind of a toothless program about this guy, but the guy really was who he was. I just wonder how people will remember. I have a feeling that people are going to remember this show now as being better than it was.
See, I would argue that more people who were predisposed to never ever watch the show, even on an airplane if they had nothing to read, would now watch the show looking for signs to make sense of the 2011 Sheen. I would absolutely watch an old episode of 2.5 Men now and be fascinated by it.
Well, have you been following much about this Chuck Lorre stuff? I didn't know anything about this guy. My wife works for the LA Times, so she's been covering this story.
Yep.
He sounds like one of the weirdest people in the world. This whole vanity card thing, I had no idea about this. Did you know about that?
No, I did not know anything about Chuck Lorre's world other than that he was...
Did you even know vanity cards existed?
No, I did not.
I did not either. It seems like something I would have known about, but I did not.
I remember reading one article about him, and I think it was in Hollywood Reporter or Vanity Fair, one of those, but, it seemed like he had a lot of bitterness that he's been the most successful showrunner the last 10 years, and yet he's not a household name. That show got no respect, et cetera, et cetera. And I vaguely remember him comparing himself to, like, the Lost creators, who everybody knows their name and everybody had so much respect for, and Two and a Half Men killed them in the ratings.
Well, I mean, also, am I wrong about this, or doesn't he traditionally only work with people who are hard to work with? Like, didn't he have issues with Brett Butler? Wasn't he on Roseanne? Wasn't that one of his shows, too?
So you think he has a fetish for working with difficult celebrities?
Well, I think he's a difficult person who seems, and he has these, obviously, if you read these vanity cards, they're all on his website. It's like at chucklorre.com. It's all the cards. You can read through them, including the censored ones. And he has a terrible relationship with his parents, obviously. Like, he seems to hate his parents almost. He seems to be just a very sort of kind of hateful person. I mean, it's hard to tell with writers sometimes because it can also be shtick, but it's almost as though he seems to think a good relationship involves out of control, misdirected emotions. Because that seems to be what he does and where he likes to work.
The other thing with Sheen, when you just look at this show as a whole, like you point out, he's going to overshadow not just that show, but some of the other stuff he did. Like, it's impossible now to watch Wall Street, I think, without applying the 2011 stuff in there. And same for Major League. He's changed the way that these movies that we've rewatched a million times, now we're going to be thinking about that stuff. It's just weird. And I guess, like, when you think about how many celebrities could say that they've changed the way that you watched a movie that you've previously enjoyed. Really, it's Mel Gibson, O.J. Simpson, The Naked Gun, and now Charlie Sheen. Like, who else has affected backwards how you felt about a movie?
I feel like there are more examples of this. We'd have to sit here and think a little bit.
Sean Bradley in Space Jam?
Well, what about, like, Harrison Ford?
Really? I watched The Fugitive, and I never think of him as the kind of old, deranged guy he is now.
Well, no, but when I say, I was over, I can't remember when this was, but, like, they were showing all the Star Wars movies on some network, and I was sort of kind of watching in and out in them, and now it's so obvious how bored he was making those movies.
Really? I'd never noticed that.
Well, because he's talked about it so much. He just, especially the Return of the Jedi, he actively seems like he's trying to wreck the movie in some ways, but it's such a big production, you can't. So I got
to look out for that. The other thing I was thinking was, when you think of how, it's kind of bizarre that America has rallied behind Sheen and how much enjoyment we're getting out of this, and the only parallel I can come up with is the O.J. car chase. The 2 hours in L.A. when people line the streets with cards and good luck juice, and isn't that kind of similar, or am I crazy?
Well, that was a shorter window of time because he was just, it was just the drive itself. I mean, so you say you would argue that we're kind of the world is looking at Charlie Sheen sort of in a heroic way.
Yeah, I mean, look at this guy. He's got twins at his house who are being babysat by a porn star and somebody who's a cover model for marijuana magazines. We know for a fact that he had a binge in a hotel room that with his kids right across the hall. We know that in the past he at least one time pleaded no contest for punching somebody he was dating. And then Denise Richards said that he abused her. I mean, if you really pick this apart, maybe not the greatest guy.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And yet this guy, I mean, I can't wait for his next tweet. He just tweeted a picture of him winning and Pong, and it said Pong and an exclamation point, and it was him with his back to the camera, holding his arms up next to a TV that had the DirecTV symbol on it. And I stared at it for 5 minutes trying to figure out what it meant. I have no idea. But
well, yeah, there is. I don't know. You can't deny that he's charismatic, I guess, and that goes so far. You know.
Yeah.
It is. It is sort of hard to imagine how people would react if, say, a woman was doing this. I just don't think it would be as positive. That she would definitely seem crazier in a more unliked way, you know?
Yeah, because when it happens with women, there's no going back. Like Lindsay Lohan has her meltdown. She really can't come back and be considered an A-list actress again. Winona Ryder steals that one thing from the store. Her career was never the same. We do seem like we penalize the female celebrities for screwing up. But the males get, chance after chance after chance. How long do you think Charlie Sheen is going to be alive?
Well, if he's not on an insane amount of stimulants, a long time. I'm sure. If he's not on drugs, there's nothing he's doing that's going to kill him. He clearly can do drugs heavily recreationally. I mean, if he's on them constantly, his heart will give out. But do you think he's going to die?
I don't know because, you're an expert on this, but there are musicians out there who have just been able to do insane amount of drugs forever, and it's never affected them, right?
Yeah, and if it hasn't happened yet, it doesn't seem like it's going to happen next, you know?
Yeah,
Maybe,
people are
it's dangerous to say that because if we get off the phone and he's dead or whatever, it's going to be really weird. But I don't think he's. He looks his face does look strange. It's like this, like he looks very kind of cadaver-like in the face, which seems to indicate that there is some things going on with his body that are, kind of bongo. But
and there's a missing tooth too. He looks a little like somebody that may have hung out with Bubbles in The Wire.
Yeah, well, the missing teeth can be a bad sign. I mean, that's like the meth sign. But
I mean, when you think about, think about what Keith Richards did just in the 70s.
Well, did you read Keith's autobiography?
I have not. I have it, and I have not read it yet. Give me your review.
For a rock autobiography, it's very well written. But he says the difference is that he was doing medical cocaine. That he was doing, like pharmaceutical cocaine, which is, very pure and very potent. And then he would only do drugs at the beginning of the night and not go back. And that was the key. He was also involved with heroin, though, and there's no really medical heroin. So it was like.
So his plan was that he dipped into it once, but he thought going back for seconds was the fear.
Because you can't get any higher at one point, and that's like the mistake all drug people make, that they seem to keep using drugs all night long. At one point you can't get any higher.
Right.
That book is interesting in a lot of ways. He takes all these shots at Mick Jagger, veiled shots for the most part, and then some direct shots at the end. But it really seems like his real issues with Jagger are based around two incidents. One, that Mick slept with a girl he was involved with, even though Keith is open about that he was cheating on her already, and later cheated on one of Mick Jagger's, with one of Mick Jagger's women. But that point, and that when Mick signed a solo deal, he piggybacked on a Rolling Stones contract, and Keith just seems to think that is beyond the pale.
And that's it. Those are the two reasons.
Well, it seems to be the two things. He makes all these other things about how, he'll make, little passing references that Mick Jagger can't hold his liquor, or he'll sort of make derogatory statements about his physical size and stuff like that, or the fact that he'll say that, I was into drugs and he's into compliments, which seems, so they're sort of kind of passing insults. Then there's these 2 points that really still seem to be in his craw.
I was thinking about this. I don't know if you saw on Saturday of All-Star Weekend, TNT did basically a fantasy draft with their 6 guys where they had to draft teams of all-time guys. And, Barkley ruined it. He took Iverson first, which was the dumbest thing ever. But other than that, it was pretty watchable. And if you had the 6th pick of the first round, you get the first pick of the second round. Mm-hmm. It was interesting putting the teams together. And for some reason it made me think, if you did this draft with music – all time, and let's say we had, me and you and 8 of our friends, and we had to draft 4 rounds, and you had to draft a singer, a drummer, a guitarist, and a bassist.
Okay.
And you could pick them in any order.
Okay, but here's the thing. Can you pick multiple members from the same band?
Yes.
Okay.
But you might not be able to get them.
I've done this before, and there's certain rules that I implement in this.
Okay, what are the rules?
Rules is, as guitar players, you cannot pick Jimi Hendrix. Okay.
So you can't pick solo acts as guitarists unless they're the singer.
You just can't pick Jimi Hendrix as your guitar player because anybody who knows about guitar would pick him. And you can't pick Frank Sinatra as your singer because some people just like to do that. And you can't pick Animal from the Muppets as your drummer because people think they're really funny when they say that.
Oh, so you've done this before?
Yeah. And it's got to be somebody else, somebody different. You can't pick any multiple members from the same band. And also, if you pick a guy on an instrument, you can only do that instrument. You can't pick Paul McCartney on bass and also have him sing. So that to me, those are usually the rules you put in place.
All right. Well, here's why I'm asking this question. Is Mick Jagger the first singer taken?
Well,
you're putting together a rock band.
Well, music is very different than sports, though, in this, because music really is much more, obviously, subjective. So people are going to pick whatever singer they like the best. Or is the idea that you're building a band that will be the most successful?
Yeah, you're starting from scratch. You're in a vacuum, able to put together the band that will last the longest, that will produce the best music, that will sell out the most stadiums and make you the most money.
Okay, so it's a fantasy league in the sense that our enjoyment of the music is a non-factor.
Yeah, I mean, that's part. You obviously want as many people as possible to enjoy it. Critical acclaim, I think, is important. It can't just be a band.
But we want the most number of people to enjoy it, not necessarily us.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, that would be a bonus. I think it needs to be a nice blend of mass audience plus critical acclaim, which I think the Rolling Stones were, in the top 3 or 4 all time for a band that managed to juggle both of those things really well.
Yeah.
And also like a band that has to be good in concert.
Okay, so
and release good albums and last and be able to play all different. Like he has to be the first pick because think of all the different things that the Stones could do.
But if you're looking for someone for the band to be live in an arena setting, I would actually probably pick Freddie Mercury or David Lee Roth.
David Lee Roth, wow, that would be controversial.
Well, but he's kind of the consummate entertainer in that idiom. It's like the only thing he does. He's not even a very good singer, but he's great at singing to a crowd of 55,000 people and sort of keeping them interested and making patter and being visually interesting. Because
so you're saying
part of the reason the Stones have been able to be so good for so long and play to these huge places is because the music they play really translates fluidly to the live experience.
Right.
Those songs really sound good live. So I could see someone picking Keith Richards as the guitar player, although he kind of only plays in one style now.
Right.
Which is just like this kind of bluesy Stone style.
Yeah, but you can have him in any year you want. So you could have him in you could pick 1977 Keith Richards.
Well, he was basically once the Beatles broke up, the Stones did not change the way they played guitar.
All right.
So pretty much anything from 70 on, really from Sticky Fingers on, all the records are sort of different versions of the same type of music. I mean,
so you're saying in such a draft, you might, let's say you had the 8th pick, you might have the plan to build around David Lee Roth as your singer. So maybe you go with a guitarist first, then you take the drummer from Rush second, and you go that, and then you get Roth in the 4th round.
But also, I just the conditions you set up. I mean, Michael Jackson would obviously go in the first. He's like one of the greatest entertainers who ever lived in terms of performing on stage.
So you would say that you put together a 4-person rock band and try to figure out how to use Michael as the front man for that. I don't know if that would work. It's a rock question.
Yeah, I mean, but basically he's a rock vocalist on Beat It. I mean, it's not like he can't sing in that style. Prince would be. I mean, Prince is another weird person in this because he plays so many different instruments. So if you pick Prince, are you getting all of that, or does he just have to sing? Yeah.
It's true. You could just have Prince as all four of your picks.
You could, yeah.
And he'll be like, I'll take that from here.
I'd probably pick a different drummer, but.
Yeah. So you're not with me on Mick.
Well, I mean, he's a great singer, and his voice actually held up way better than, say, like Robert Plant's did. I mean, he was. I saw the Rolling Stones on like the Bridges to Babylon tour, I think it was, and he still sounded completely. He sounded the way he did when he was young. When I saw him at the Super Bowl, it was weird kind of audio there, but he still sounded pretty good. As of late, it does seem like his voice is finally starting to go, but it definitely lasted longer than his peers.
That always is interesting when somebody can keep their voice, somebody who is doing a lot of drinking, and I assume Mick Jagger smokes, right? Or must have at some
point. I feel like I've seen him photograph with cigarettes many times, but I don't, he might be really healthy now. Seems like he'd be the kind of person who would.
Did you see the Michael Jackson "This Is It" documentary?
I did not.
I got to say that was worth watching. I stumbled into it, and I watched it with my daughter, who was confused for 10 minutes whether it was a boy or a girl, which I thought was funny. But it was really, really interesting, and now I totally believe that he was killed.
You do? I
do. I totally believe it. I'm on board with that one.
You mean accidentally killed or murdered?
I think he was accidentally murdered by doctors who were not monitoring how much medication they were giving him.
So that they should be tried for murder?
Yes.
Or for manslaughter?
Because the guy in that documentary is somebody that did not want to overdose on anything and actually was really invested and still had a little bit in the gas tank. That's what I was shocked by. And I thought the cool thing about the doc is that I thought that side of Jackson was 10 years gone, 12 years gone, whatever. The part of...
Isn't this documentary that was completely controlled by the family?
Are you talking about This Is It?
Yeah.
Whether it was controlled or not, they have footage of him, really rehearsing what the concert's going to be like and working with the people and saying, no, you got to do this. Like, he was really into it. We got it. Let's get the dancers to hit this note instead of that note, and I want this guy to be over here. Like, he was in it. Yeah,
but I'm sure he was. There would be no reason for him not to be mentally engaged. I mean, I guess you're saying he was, unless you thought he was just completely out of it. But
I just thought the last decade, I thought this was a guy that was just in this medicated haze and had lost all contact with reality and, was severely depressed and heartbroken and all, and it just doesn't come off that way in the documentary. So either...
Although choreographing a stage show isn't really reality.
I know, but he has a spark. This isn't like a broken down dude who's about to die. That's what's weird. You should watch it.
Maybe I will. I heard when I heard that it was controlled by the family, I was like, there's going to be nothing interesting in here.
Yeah, no, it's not. And the other thing, my daughter was just riveted, and she's 5.5, or she was 5.5 when she watched it. But I think little kids, the music that he played and the way that he danced and some of the stuff he did. I just think he's going to keep going. I don't think he trails off, and as the years go, everybody's going to forget about all the weird stuff, and the lawsuits and the trials and stuff like that, and it'll be like an afterthought in 100 years.
Yeah, well, I guess I agree with you. I think that he probably will be remembered probably positively as time moves on.
I mean, we're already there.
Well, it didn't take long. It just took basically he just needed to die.
It was the greatest career move ever.
Yeah.
It was. I think he would have killed himself accidentally 10 years before if he knew what the response was going to be. You wanted to talk about the concept of labor.
Yeah, I did want to talk to you about labor because I feel like there's a lot of weird things happening in the culture right now, and they all seem tied to people's relationship and perception of labor. The Charlie Sheen thing is part of this, but also, like, the Pistons mutiny, I feel like, is part of this. Obviously, what's going on in Wisconsin is sort of maybe the clearest real example, but even the lockout talks with the NFL, it seems as though we've hit some strange point where people have really mixed, confused feelings about what things should be worth and who owns certain things. Like, what did you think of the Pistons mutiny? Maybe you've talked about this in other podcasts.
I have not.
I have not really heard your take on this.
I have not talked about it in podcasts. I've not written about it. I have been fascinated by it. I
think it's extremely fascinating. Here again, I don't remember a situation where a player as good as Rip Hamilton, even though it's the end of his career sort of, was just suddenly benched without real explanation. It's
been the most undercovered story of the year when you look at how much time and space has been devoted to the Carmelo trade, the decision, the Miami Heat, the trade deadline, all this stuff. And, you know, I think to me it goes beyond just the mutiny. It goes to, like, here's this franchise that was, you know, one of the signature franchises the last 25 years or so, I think. It's going back to Isaiah, and a franchise that had really, really good fans, at least up until, you know, the mid-2000s, and is just a mess now. I mean, you could start, first of all, you start with the Artest melee, because it's never, that city's never been the same as a basketball city since that happened. But, you know, they have this ownership situation. That's the part that nobody's been writing about. They're basically held hostage by the fact that they can't sell the team. And you have this situation like Rip Hamilton, where normally you'd buy him out, but they can't. You have this coach that they need to fire, but they can't fire him because they don't want to spend any more money on a new one. You have these veterans that they all wanted to go. They never got traded. They didn't get bought out. So it kind of makes sense when you look at the big picture.
Yeah, I mean, what you're describing is sort of the perfect storm for how this could occur. But here's, I guess, this is, in a way, this is what I want to ask you about, although this question, in a sense, is more abstract. For years, whenever we've talked about pro basketball, it's always been like, you know, well, this is a players' league. You can fire a coach, but you can't fire the players. If it's a dispute between Magic and Paul Westhead, like, he's going to get fired, you know,
Yeah.
Okay, but now this has really happened. I mean, I think we're really at a point now where it's pretty hard to argue that the players do not run the league. They basically decide where they want to play in a way that has never happened before. The idea of building super teams and having these interpersonal relationships is kind of central to every discussion. It used to be if a guy was going, on the free agent market, you would say, like, well, he's friends with this guy or he knows this guy, but always was just about money. That doesn't seem
hold on one second, though. I would argue, and I did last week, that the league's always operated that way. It's just that it's written about so extensively now that it's become an issue, but it was always an issue. Because guys always picked where they wanted to play.
I disagree with you on that.
Why?
And I think that, I mean, beyond the situation that happened with the Heat, which you could say is just an anomaly, is a strange deal, how many player mutinies do you remember happening like this?
Oh, no, that's a separate argument. I'm talking about players deciding where they wanted to play and guys teaming up. I mean, we've seen that every decade. I don't think that much is different. I think what's, you know, as you said, this specific mutiny.
No way, man. I mean, like, every decade this probably has happened. You're a historian, you'll be able to bring up examples of this. But just the idea that people go to people's weddings now and make jokes about joining the same team, and there is a degree of seriousness with that remark, that's new.
Well, like the 04 Lakers, 03-04 Lakers.
Okay.
Peyton and Mailman joined that team.
Yeah, that's less than 10 years ago, Bill. I mean, that's still this era.
I know.
I mean, this is the extension. I mean, if you're saying that this has been happening for the last 10 years, that's probably true.
Well, no, I'm going backwards.
Okay.
The 96 Rockets, were when Barkley, Drexler, and Hakeem, and then before the lockout, they went and they recruited Pippen, and then it was Pippen, Barkley, and Hakeem. Mm-hmm. So that's another case. Shaq. Were
those really pre-existing relationships prior to that, though? Wasn't that a decision based on the fact that our best chance to win is to get these three guys who are all available at this point in their career?
The Barkley, Drexler, Hakeem, I think, was something that was basically came from them. And I think, those guys all know each other at that point. And then you go back, what about Shaq going from Orlando to Los Angeles?
Well, he wanted to be in L.A. I mean,
Right.
Players can dictate where they want to go, but it's different now.
So you're saying it's much more collaborative with where they want to go than you feel like it's ever been?
It's more collaborative, and the idea of Shaq going from Orlando to L.A., it's like he wasn't going to stay in Orlando. He wanted to go to a big market. There were two possible places he could go. The Lakers were in the best position to make that deal. I feel like that was primarily, like Shaq wanted to go, but it was management pulling the strings and making the decision. And that if Shaq had just declared that he wanted to go to L.A., it might have happened, and it wouldn't have happened if say, Jerry Buss would have thought this is a bad move for the franchise. Now it seems like if the Shaq situation was happening in the present tense, and he wanted to go to Los Angeles, somehow he would be able to force that hand, But these are kind of detailed things. What I'm more curious about you saying is, or hearing what your answer is because we watch the NBA for the players.
Yeah.
And that, is this a better, more reasonable system? Do you think that the players should have the most control in terms of, you look at there's three levels of people involved with the NBA. You have the players, you have management, and you have ownership. Ownership
right.
and management have a relationship. Management and players have a relationship. Who should be in control?
It's funny you bring this up because Gladwell and I did this thing at the Technology Summit last week at All-Star Weekend, which is this thing they have for GMs and owners and sponsors and people like that. And it's basically they have these panels, but we did a special panel about where the league's going. And Gladwell had this whole concept about the league. The league exists for three people. Or three groups of people, the fans, the owners, and the players. And his question was, how does the league prioritize who's the most important out of those three? Because you could argue right now the fans are a distant third, and that most decisions are made in favor of the owners, but the players have gained steam, and now the fans are much, much, much lower. Nobody cares about the fans. It's like, hey, Cleveland, sorry, LeBron's going to leave. Should the league have more of a responsibility to make the three groups more equal?
Well, the problem with that, though, is that in those three groups he outlined, two are real groups and one is a construction. We can't really say who the fans are. So how do you possibly deal with a group that we don't even know how large it is or who really counts? I mean, you said we got to worry, have these concerns for the fans. Does that mean a fan like you? Does that mean a very casual fan who watches the game on television 5 or 6 times during the year and then during the playoffs?
Well, why does the league exist?
What?
Why does the league exist? Because they're a product that they sell to fans. Fans pay tickets, they buy jerseys, they buy hats, they subscribe to League Pass, they're the customers. And you would think that the league would make decisions based on trying to have the best possible relationship with its customers at all times.
Okay, so what constitutes a customer? How much does someone have to pay per year to be in that class?
Well, I would argue that customers would be from all classes. Like you'd have college kids who couldn't afford to go to any games or get the league pass, but still care about the league and watch all the ABC games, watch the TNT games, read up on it, read everything on the internet. Like those fans to me matter just as much as the fans that are going to buy courtside.
They're investing time, you're saying.
Yeah, well, those are also future fans that might have money someday and might have the money to take their kids to games. Like, I think their concerns are for fans from the ages of 4 to 80. And the points of their lives that they're at, when you look at some of the stuff they've done with social media, and they've been the best at it out of anybody, their Facebook page by far drives the most traffic of any of the 4 major sports, and they have the best relationship with YouTube out of anybody because of they allow anybody to put up any clips whatsoever. And they proactively try to engage the fans, whereas a sport like baseball, which has, they ban all YouTube clips and they have a terrible Facebook page, that's a sport that doesn't seem to be proactively engaging the fans as much.
But to me, the best way, if you were thinking to engage the fans, okay,
right.
I'm a fan. What's the best way to engage me? Okay, well, the answer to that is very simple. have the best product on the court.
Yep.
Okay. May have the most interesting game. Okay. So from my perspective, the best thing you could do for the NBA would be to contract it, to shorten the schedule, to make the playoffs in a single elimination tournament. My enjoyment would go way up. But
It's a
now
great
that
point.
obviously would be penalizing many, many more fans. It would, even if we just take the first step, because my ones at the end are radical, they could never happen. But let's say we contracted the league by 4 teams. Obviously, the level of play would improve, but all the people in those communities, all those quote-unquote fans, they would be losing, right? So if you're really going to try to do things for the fans, you're going to make the product probably worse. And for somebody who's perhaps a more serious fan of the game of basketball and not the idea of this league that someone built, it's going to hurt them.
Well, you went in one direction there, but I was going to say, like, the players, all of them say that the season should be shorter. And if you asked any of them and you would say, what's the best thing that you could do for the NBA? They would say, chop 10 games off the schedule because the back-to-backs kill us. There's a lot of times when we're playing hurt, they don't feel like they're putting on the best product that they could for the fans. And then it goes to the playoffs and it's like, they have to play in 10 weeks. They might have to play 25 playoff games. And those playoff games are basically like worth 2 games, like for the intensity and how hard they're trying, things like that. All of them say that they need a lesser schedule, and the league just doesn't care.
Well, okay, but if you ask these players, should we reduce the schedule from 82 to 70 games, they'll all say yes. Would they also accept a 12% cut in pay?
That's the hypocrisy right there.
Of course they're not. I mean,
Right.
Of course that you're going to say they should play fewer games if with it the same. I mean, who would? I'm sure in an ideal world they would play 21 games or whatever. If the money was the same.
Well, and that's like when you go back to the Pistons mutiny. Rip Hamilton, like these guys who they skip the shoot around and all that stuff. You would think the Pistons would be empowered to find these guys and suspend them without pay for a couple games or whatever they need to do. And the collective bargaining agreement is constructed in a way that you just can't take money from players unless you have like an awesome reason. Like look at what happened to Sprewell.
Mm-hmm.
I think Sprewell got all his money back, didn't he?
Eventually?
I think
don't
he
know
did.
if he eventually did. He probably did, though.
Or
'Cause
some of it, or something.
They're pretty good in the way they work these things, in that the money paybacks and stuff always come like years later.
Right.
So no one even notices,
But isn't that like, if I said to ESPN, no, I don't like my editor. I'm not coming to work. I'm not handing anything. I'm not doing. I'm going to disappear for 5 weeks. I think I would get fired. But somebody like Rip Hamilton, who has checked out basically, and has openly clashed with the coach and yelled at him in front of the other. Like, how can they still pay this guy? That's the part I don't get. I have a lot of questions about the mutiny.
But what?
The mutiny is, to me, I just wish somebody would write like an idiot's guide to the mutiny, and just, I'm so fascinated by it, and I don't think players have ever hated a coach this much, right?
Well, I'm sure that probably has happened lots of times, but it was almost like this was never, this type of move was never on the table, because for so long there was just this ingrained element in sports that no matter how much of a jerk your coach was, that was just part of it,
Yeah, but you can't forget the Sprewell Carlissimo.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that was.
The guy choked him. I thought we thought we were making new ground with that whole thing. At least nobody's hit John Keister.
Well, I suppose that was worse. But the thing that seemed different about it, and this is why that was a personality issue. Okay, that was this idea that Sprewell was breaking the social boundaries of what a person does in a situation. But this is actually an organized labor situation, because it seems as though they made this discussion knowing what the effect would be, or having an idea of what the effect would be, or we're simply testing to see maybe there'd be no effect. Maybe he'll just have to play us because they can't play with 6 guys, and they did.
It's a lot of similarities to Buddy and Hoosiers. When Buddy walks off and he says, "Good luck winning with 6 guys, coach," or 5.5, or whatever he says. Buddy came back. They never had the scene in the movie that showed when he came back, but he did come back.
There's no like apology scene or anything? Or?
No, they had it.
It's been a long time since I've seen that.
They filmed the scene, but they didn't put it in the movie, and they kind of hoped nobody noticed. But now that it's on cable, pretty much once a week, people notice. They put the deleted scene on the DVD. How did you tie in the Pistons mutiny to Wisconsin and Charlie Sheen? I'm interested.
Well, because all of these issues to me, you say like you'd like a more information about the mutiny. In some ways, I would like more information about Wisconsin because I feel the only information I get comes from the left or the right. Like I don't feel like I understand the situation with the kind of accuracy I should. However, the one thing that is very easy to sort of deduce is how people are reacting to it and who they're placing blame on and what they think is important. I mean, the Charlie Sheen thing, he wants $3 million now per episode. Okay, now I looked up what the revenue for 2.5 Men is per year, per season. Last season it was something like $155 million.
Profit, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Revenue. I'm not sure actually
okay.
now.
Okay.
I'm not sure if I looked up profit or revenue. I just remember that number.
Wait, whatever, it's a lot.
It's a lot. Okay, and how many episodes do they show a season?
They make 22, and it's their signature show.
Okay, so 22 times 3 would be $66 million.
It's still a good deal.
Yeah, so does he's doing all these crazy things, saying all these crazy statements about winning, but is that statement not crazy?
Not crazy at all.
So you think that, so at what point would his demand be crazy? Well,
some perspective, Friends, when their contracts ran out and they had NBC over a barrel do more, they did the solidarity thing. I think they ended up getting $20 million per season, each one of them. So it was $120 million for the cast members, and NBC.
I think that they kind of bargained collectively, and they all got $1 million an episode.
Yeah, so it was $22 million, and NBC still made money. And now Charlie Sheen is worth 6 Friends cast members because they can't have that show without him, basically.
Well, but here's the deal. This is sort of the question that we were talking about, like who really owns the NBA? What really makes 2.5 Men popular? If we're looking at it from a very superficial way, we'd say it's a star-driven show, and he's the biggest star.
Yep.
You know. But is the real reason 2.5 Men is popular is because TV is popular? And that if CBS had a totally different show in there with different people and a different premise, it might not be as popular. But because CBS is a network, because people are always going to watch TV, because there's only a set number of television shows that really appeal to, say, the quote-unquote average person, the straw man we're talking about, is he really the factor, or is he the one who's benefiting from this mechanism that exists? And should the money be going to CBS? Because ultimately, that's why the show is popular. Not because they've put together a good show, but because that show exists on CBS.
I would argue that he's already created that franchise for them. And at this point, and Chris Connolly and I talked about this yesterday, Chris Connolly felt like they could move in Rob Lowe right now as his debaucherous cousin. Get rid of Sheen, pay Rob Lowe less, and the show would get the same ratings or pretty close. So I guess the comparison you make is kind of like what the Cardinals are dealing now with Pujols. Pujols just had the first 10 seasons of his career were the greatest of anyone's first 10 seasons. Mm. He wants to now get paid the most money ever for the next 10 seasons, but they're paying him, if they paid him $300 million, there's no way his next 10 seasons will be as good as the first 10 that he had. Yeah. So they'd really be paying him for the last 10 seasons. They'd be paying the price that they should have paid for the last 10 seasons for these next 10 when he won't do as well. So if you're the Cardinals, you don't want to do that, but if you're Pujols, you feel like you've earned that money retroactively. This is why we have contract arguments. That
they're essentially, that he's saying that you underpaid me for 10 years, almost as a show of good faith. You should overpay me now.
Well, I don't even think he's saying that. I think
he's probably, not. No, but that's in reality what's happening.
Well, he probably feels that his next 10 seasons will be just as good as his last 10. But if that happened, that would immediately make him the greatest athlete of all time, hands down. Nobody else would come close. If he put together 20 seasons instead of 10, like the 10 he just had, it would have no correlation to anything that's ever happened in professional sports.
But yeah, well, that would the expectation. No one would expect that. And I see
Right.
what you're saying. But I don't think it's the same as what I'm saying. Because what I'm talking about with this show is that now that the show exists, it seems like he's everything for it. The whole show is because. But what if they had not even selected the pilot? What if they had chosen a different pilot, okay, to fill that time slot and to fill that role instead of 2 men and a half man or whatever? Let's say they had a show about a woman who owns a tiger and she accidentally marries the tiger, and then they have a butler and she falls in love with the butler. Now the woman and the man and the tiger have to live together.
You better copyright that. Copyright that idea.
Maybe the show is not as popular as 2.5 Men, but it might be 2/3 as popular. It might be, maybe instead of $155 million a year, maybe it makes $100 million a year. Maybe the fact that whatever show was playing this role in this place was going to succeed.
But well, the problem is that when they got him to do this show, they probably paid him really well because he was an established TV star at that point because he had taken over from Michael J. Fox on Spin City and the show had done well. So that was still the period where it was like, getting a established movie actor to be on a TV show was kind of a coup. Right. The people that it's kind of reversed, but yeah. You know who the most underpaid TV star is? Hands down.
No idea.
The 7 people on the Jersey Shore. How much money have they made MTV for versus what they've actually gotten?
But now this is the. One could argue that that's the ultimate example of what I'm saying. That right. One could argue that what's interesting, that what succeeds about the Jersey Shore is that, or in any reality programming, it's that people are seeing someone who seems like someone they could know in life. Now, I don't feel that way about the Jersey Shore. I think that the thing that makes the program different than every other reality show MTV has produced anew for the last decade, it's like there's something about those specific people that could not have been predicted by MTV. Like, they couldn't have constructed a show that is as interesting to watch as the one that came up. But at the same time, those people bring no special skills to the table.
But here's my counter to your point. I would argue that had they picked different people for this show, it wouldn't have done as well. For whatever reason, by the miracle of casting, they hit a home run with everybody they picked.
Well, I've used this example when people have asked me about this show before. They could have never occurred to them that the women they picked for this show would be into steroid users.
Right.
Like, they could have never thought, you know what would be cool if we found some girls who like gorilla juice heads.
Yep.
Like that. I don't think anyone thought that such a person really was out there, Yeah. And then they got 2 of them by chance,
You know what? We kept going for so long that we had to split this up into 2 parts. Stay tuned for part 2 of the BS Report with Chuck Klosterman, coming soon to iTunes or ESPN.com's Pod Center.
So I get to sign off. Whoa!
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Pod Center at ESPNradio.com.
Peace out.